Howdy folks, and welcome back to my channel. We're staring down the barrel of one of the most disgusting abuses of bureaucratic power I have ever seen. And that's saying something when you're talking about California. You spend time wading through the swamp of anti-gun absurdity in that state, and you get used to outright bans. But what the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, LASD, has been caught doing is somehow even more cowardly. They didn't ban the right to self-defense, they just decided to choke it to death with endless paper, deliberate delay, and outright contempt for the rule of law. While law-abiding citizens were being victimized on their streets, waiting for a chance to protect their own families, the supposed protectors in LA County were literally sitting on their rights for years, pretending the Second Amendment was nothing more than an optional suggestion. This isn't incompetence, this is systematic tyranny masquerading as administration. And I'm personally sharing and analyzing this story because it is high time we called out this rot for what it is. It's time to see how the Trump administration's DOJ finally put their foot down. Let me be clear right up front. What the Trump administration's DOJ did here is nothing short of historic. For decades, we, as gun owners, have watched the DOJ act reactively, sometimes filing a countersuit or, often, sadly, even defending the expansion of infringements on our rights, such as bump stocks or pistol braces. This time, however, the script was completely flipped, and I believe this signals a massive shift in how the federal government views the enforcement of civil liberties for responsible firearm owners. This is officially the first affirmative lawsuit in support of gun owners filed by the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. They didn't wait for the LASD to be sued first. They went on the offensive, asserting the civil rights of citizens who were being systematically denied their fundamental freedoms. The legal backbone for this aggressive move is the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, 34 U.S.C. Section 12601. Now, you usually hear that statute mentioned when discussing corrupt or abusive police practices, but the Trump administration showed real legal foresight by recognizing that systematically denying a constitutional right through delay constitutes a pattern or practice of civil rights discrimination, just the same as any other form of bias. As Attorney General Pamela Bondi rightly stated, the Second Amendment protects the fundamental constitutional right of law-abiding citizens to bear arms, and no county, especially not a leftist stronghold like Los Angeles County, gets to infringe upon that right just because they may not like it. This is a victory for accountability, telling bureaucrats nationwide that they are not above the Constitution.
If you want proof that this entire operation in Los Angeles County was a deliberate and cynical effort to thwart the Second Amendment, you just need to look at the numbers. The DOJ investigation, which was launched on March 27, 2025, following a flood of complaints regarding unreasonable delays, eventually forced the LASD to hand over data spanning over 8,000 CCW permit applications. The numbers they uncovered weren't just bad, they confirmed a staggering scope of constitutional violation. Specifically, the federal government focused its attention on the new applications received between January 2024 and March 31, 2025, which totaled 3,982 applications for a new concealed carry license. Here is the truly unbelievable punchline that tells the whole story. As of May 8, 2025, the LASD had approved exactly 2 of those new licenses. That calculates out to a dismal 0.05% approval rate. I ask you, how can nearly 4,000 law-abiding individuals in one of the largest counties in America submit applications for a fundamental right, and only 2 of them are deemed worthy? That's not a processing wag. That is a systematic blockade designed to run a de facto gun control scheme that bypasses the law. It is not just the Second Amendment that the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department was trampling. They couldn't even manage to adhere to the statutory requirements set by their own state legislature, which, trust me, is already rigged against gun owners. Under California Penal Code Section 26202D, the state mandates that licensing authorities provide the applicant with a written notice of the initial determination, whether they are disqualified or not, within a mere 90 days of receiving the completed application. This 9-month window is supposed to be the longest initial wait allowed under California law. The reality documented in the lawsuit paints a picture of deliberate contempt for these deadlines. The DOJ found that applicants were forced to wait an average of 281 days, nearly 10 months, just to get to the next step of processing, which typically involves scheduling an interview. Worse still, the median delay was even longer, clocking in at 372 days, a full year. And for the unlucky few, the delays stretched out as long as 1,030 days, which is nearly 3 years of waiting for a decision on a simple piece of paper. It must be noted that a California CCW permit is valid for a maximum of 2 years from the date of issuance. How can a county possibly justify a wait time of up to 3 years for a permit that expires in 2 years? This is not just running over state law. It is demonstrating a flagrant disregard for both state law and constitutional obligations.
Any discussion of concealed carry in America today must start with the Supreme Court's monumental 2022 ruling in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, Inc. v. Bruin. The High Court made it absolutely clear. The Second and 14th Amendments protect the right of a law-abiding individual to carry a handgun for self-defense outside the home. This decision fundamentally dismantled the subjective, arbitrary may-issue regimes that allowed leftist officials in states like California, New York, and New Jersey to decide who was special enough to be trusted with their own self-defense. The court effectively mandated shall-issue standards, meaning if an applicant meets the objective criteria, age, background check, training, the permit shall be issued. But the bureaucrats in Los Angeles County chose to defy this mandate. They couldn't legally use a proper cause requirement to deny the applications, so they simply created an administrative black hole where applications go to languish indefinitely. By scheduling interviews as far out as November 2026 for applications submitted years prior, and keeping approximately 2,768 new applications pending as of May 2025, the LASD successfully constructed a de facto no-issue system by delay. This systematic delay turns a right into a privilege subject to an unconstitutional years-long queue. This entire lawsuit is fundamentally about enforcing the will of the Supreme Court against local governments that are intentionally fighting to nullify our rights through bureaucratic cruelty. I shall analyze the psychological and procedural weapon that the LASD deployed against its own citizens: administrative exhaustion. This is a cynical tactic where a government agency intentionally makes a legal process so cumbersome, slow, and frustrating that the citizen simply gives up, withdrawing their application rather than completing the multi-year bureaucratic marathon. The numbers speak to the success of this cruel strategy. The lawsuit explicitly notes that 1,210 applications for new licenses were withdrawn for various reasons, often after sitting untouched by the LASD for many months. Think about the human reality here. A law-abiding citizen, concerned about rising crime, goes through the effort and expense of applying for a CCW permit, only to realize the process will take longer than the life of the permit itself. They wait 9 months just for a decision to begin processing, only to be told their interview is scheduled 2 years later. Faced with this endless, stalled process, the citizen is effectively forced to abandon their constitutional rights. Assistant Attorney General Harmit K. Dillon pointed out that the official number of applications cited in the lawsuit, 3,982, likely underrepresent the true demand because residents have already learned that applying is pointless, given the 3-year wait. The moment a constitutional right is, quote, deliberately delayed beyond any reasonable time frame, the DOJ correctly argues they are effectively denied.
Of course, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department didn't just shrug its shoulders, they offered a laundry list of excuses that fail the basic test of constitutional responsibility. Spokesperson Nicole Nishida claimed the department was processing applications in compliance with state and local laws, asserting the low numbers cited by the DOJ were contrary to the statistics, reflecting an overall increased rate of issuance since 2020. They pointed to the fact that when Sheriff Robert Luna took office in 2022, he inherited a backlog of 10,000 applications. They also noted that the department was transitioning from an old, manual, paper-based system to a more streamlined online platform during the investigative period. I find these excuses completely transparent and insulting to the law-abiding public. While the LASD claims to have reduced the inherited backlog down to about 3,200 applications, the average delay of 281 days and the median delay of 372 days demonstrate that the department chose to actively neglect the civil rights of its citizens. Furthermore, their admission that only 13 personnel were originally assigned to handle all CCW applications for a county of this size proves this was a choice, not an accident. As they face a significant staffing crisis, they are working with the county to fund more positions, but this prioritization should have happened the moment the Bruen decision legally shifted California to a shall-issue state. Resources are allocated based on priority, and the LASD clearly prioritized everything except the constitutional right to self-defense. To expose the sheer absurdity of LA County's delays, we don't need to look at some mythical, perfect government agency. We can look at one of the most anti-gun jurisdictions in the nation, and the comparison is devastating to the LASD's position. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet K. Dion explicitly called Los Angeles a real outlier in permit processing efficiency, noting that even places notorious for strict regulation, like Washington, D.C., process permits in a matter of days. Dion shared her own personal experience. I walked into the municipal building, got fingerprinted, submitted proof of firearms training, and 6 days later, I got it. 6 days. Compare that with the Angelinos who waited an average of 281 days for their application to even be acknowledged. The difference isn't infrastructure or paperwork complexity, it is political will. The solution, as Dion pointed out, is brutally simple. They need to just hire more people to do this and treat it seriously. Los Angeles County is choosing not to staff the unit adequately because the goal is not to process permits, but to discourage and deny applicants. This comparison destroys the LASD's defense of staffing shortages and shows their delays are a conscious policy choice to nullify through bureaucratic obstruction what they cannot deny through law.
We must always remember that this bureaucratic stonewalling is not just an abstract legal issue. It has a profound, dangerous impact on public safety, especially for the most vulnerable residents of Los Angeles County who live in high-crime areas. While city officials prattle about gun control, they are deliberately disarming the very citizens who need protection the most. Acting U.S. Attorney Bill Esali underscored this point perfectly. Citizens living in high-crime areas cannot afford to wait to protect themselves with firearms while Los Angeles County dithers, adding that the right to bear arms must be upheld. This delay forces citizens to remain victims or face felony charges under California law for carrying a concealed firearm if they choose to defend themselves without the required license. Assistant Attorney General Dillon strongly argued that wider CCW access is actually a boost to public safety, asserting that the best defense is a good defense against soaring crime. This perspective is grounded in the reality that armed and trained citizens enhance safety by having the capability to interrupt a serious crime. FBI data confirms that armed citizens have, in fact, successfully intervened in active shooter incidents. When the LASD blocks access to self-defense for up to 1,030 days, they are actively making their community less safe in the face of rising threats. The legal implications of this DOJ lawsuit extend far beyond the borders of Los Angeles County and even the state of California. By filing this as the first affirmative lawsuit in support of gun owners under the Civil Rights Statute that targets a pattern or practice of constitutional deprivation, the federal government has established a potent new legal weapon. The message is unmistakable to every anti-gun jurisdiction that has tried to skirt the Supreme Court's 2022 Bruin decision. Cities and states that were forced to switch from may issue to shall issue, like New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and Massachusetts, are now on notice. If they rely on red tape denials and years-long wait times to effectively nullify the Second Amendment, they now can face direct federal intervention. This lawsuit is rooting out the insidious practice of bureaucratic obstruction that tries to achieve de facto prohibition where de jure prohibition failed. Furthermore, the investigation, which was triggered by numerous complaints, has created a direct reporting channel for oppressed citizens. The DOJ urges anyone who has not received a reply or decision on their CCW application within 4 months to the federal government email address. This is critical. This mailbox is actively monitored by attorneys dedicated to preserving the Second Amendment. This whole case is a huge win, regardless of the outcome, because it has brought national attention and federal accountability to the local tyranny of anti-gun bureaucrats.
This federal action against the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is a critical line in the sand. I stand with the Trump DOJ in declaring that the Second Amendment is not a second-class right. When a county uses average delays of 281 days and up to 1,030 days to process permits, resulting in only 2 approvals out of almost 4,000 applications, they are not managing bureaucracy, they are deliberately denying constitutional rights. It is imperative that law-abiding Americans take responsibility for their own defense, but they must be allowed to do so without enduring years of politically motivated obstruction. This lawsuit will deliver a powerful and necessary rippling effect of accountability across the nation, forcing all jurisdictions to adhere to the mandate of Bruin and finally onto the right to bear arms outside the home.